Were you ever told in school that you could help save natural resources simply by reducing the time you took a shower or turning off the faucet as you brushed your teeth? What if I told you that you could conserve the same amount of water by not eating 1 pound of meat as you could if you did not shower completely for 6 months? Many people today, just like myself, care deeply about the size of our environmental footprint, but often the steps we take to reduce that are just not very effective. So as someone who cares deeply about the environment today, I want to share with you a way that you can reduce your footprint that you probably never even heard of. Nearly every research study done by the government or in private institutions show us that veganism is the environmental sustainability secret that our textbooks have never told us was there. By eating a vegan diet, or at least reducing our intake of meat and dairy, we can drastically reduce the greenhouse gas effect and environmental degradation. First, I'm going to explain to you how animal agriculture affects our use of natural resources, and then I'm going to talk about how it affects our greenhouse gas emissions. Lastly, I'm going to discuss how meat consumption is killing the biodiversity in our oceans. So first, let's talk about natural resources. Animal agriculture is the main source of depletion of our natural resources, including water, land, and our rainforests. Water conservation is talked about a lot these days with how many droughts are going on in the western United States. Yet, according to a book called More and Cleaner Water, we only use about 5% of our water for residential use, and about 55% of that goes to animal agriculture. The reason for this is because how much water it takes to raise animals, livestock in particularly. So it takes actually about 2,500 gallons of water just to raise, to produce 1 pound of beef, which is takes me back to my original statement about it takes so much water to raise cattle that you could actually save far more water simply by not eating meat than you ever could by reducing your showers to only 5 minutes. The land use in raising cattle in particularly is also extremely unsustainable. According to a report called Livestock's Long Shadow, livestock occupies 1/3 of our ice-free land and about half of the United States. In the documentary Cowspiracy, producer Kip Anderson discusses how our cattle ranch practices are so unsustainable that the cows are actually overgrazing our land and thus leading to desertification of those areas. Yet even if we raise cattle sustainably with enough land to graze so that desertification would not happen, the land used for animal agriculture would skyrocket. If all ranches ran sustainably, we would have to cover the entirety of North America with cattle ranches simply to provide for the meat demands of the United States. According to the same Livestock's Long Shadow report, animal agriculture is the leading cause of rainforest destruction, and it totals about 90% in the Amazon alone. So, saving the rainforest is not as simple as recycling. In fact, this would do very little given that the rainforest area that is being destroyed isn't being cut down or used for wood, it's actually being burned. So not only are we not getting the wood, we are completely destroying the environment and at the same time releasing thousands of tons of CO2 in the atmosphere, all in the name of eating beef. So let's move on to how meat affects our air pollution. Animal agriculture has a much larger effect on greenhouse gas emissions than people would even realize. According to the same report by Livestock's Long Shadow, livestock is more responsible for greenhouse gas emissions than the entire transportation industry combined. The report states that animal agriculture contributes to 18% of our greenhouse gas emissions, while transportation industry only contributes about 13%. So the emissions we talk about here are just the methane released by the cow's digestive system. So it probably seems slightly ridiculous for me to essentially be comparing cow farts to the insane amount of CO2 produced by the transportation industry. But the important part here is the difference between methane and CO2 and how it acts in the atmosphere. According to a scholarly report in the magazine Science, methane has a global warming potential that is 86 times that of CO2. So essentially what that means is you would need 86 times more CO2 in the atmosphere for methane and CO2 to have the exact same effect on the greenhouse effect, which then makes, because methane is more dangerous, and makes animal agriculture thus more dangerous in the transportation industry. Lastly, let's talk about how meat eating affects the world's oceans. Though it is harder to see, the effects of livestock practices and overfishing in our oceans are completely killing the biodiversity. You may be wondering why I claim livestock which is clearly a land practice, could be killing our oceans. This is because of the practices cattle farms use in raising their livestock. The feed for livestock is so full of artificial preservatives and hormones that when it rains, these chemicals leach into our water supply, run out through our rivers, and then into our oceans, which then leads to very nitrogen-dense areas of our oceans that then become oxygen depleted and kills all the fish in that area. According to a press release by the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium, more than 500 nitrogen-depleted ocean zones exist worldwide, one of the largest of which is the Mississippi River Delta in the Gulf of Mexico. Overfishing has also been a huge problem in the world's fisheries. A report by the UN stated that about 3/4 of the world's fisheries are either completely depleted or exploited, and we could see fishless oceans as soon as 2048. So while we can't really see how our practices are affecting our oceans, it's actually been one of the hardest hit ecosystems by bad environmental practices. So to conclude, let's review. Animal agriculture has had more of an effect on the environmental degradation than we really realize. It is the leading cause of depletion of many of our natural resources, has more an effect on the greenhouse gas emissions than the transportation industry, and is completely killing the biodiversity in our oceans. If animal agriculture has this much of an effect on our environmental sustainability, then by eating less meat, we could surely reduce some of these effects. By going completely vegan, an individual could conserve up to 500,000 gallons of water a year and use 18 times less land to grow their food. If you're truly passionate about saving the environment, then eating little to no meat is really the only diet you can ethically consider. I hope from this speech you have learned more about the environmental benefits of eating either a vegan or plant-based diet. Thank you for listening.